Hey, happy December. It's time to talk about what to do around the farm, around the homestead, and in the garden this month in the midst of all of the craziness. Now, I know all of us are kind of short on time because of all the holidays, the family visits, all of the crazy rush. So for me, like November and December are really the times of year that I have to escalate my planning, and really be honest with myself about my time. I obviously give a long list at permaculturefx.com of all of the things that I try to do in the garden. But if we're really honest, I don't get to all of them because, it's cold outside. I'm spending time with family. I'm busy. I have days like today where I'm wearing my onesie. I'm still in my pajamas and it is 1:00 in the afternoon. And yes, I did farm chores and went out and let the chickens out in my onesie. And I figure if you can listen to these or watch these in your onesies, then I can record them in my onesies. So, I don't even know. I think my brother and sister got me this one. So hopefully yours is cooler than mine. So I want to jump into first the top 3 things that I would recommend doing in the major growing zone categories if you're really short on time. So it's like, dude, if I can't do anything else, what are the 3 things that I need to get done around the garden and the homestead, that sort of thing this month? So if you're in USDA zones 3 through 8, the first thing that I would recommend doing, we talked about this a little bit last month as well, this is kind of your last chance to plant those dormant bulbs. So whether we're talking garlic, or daffodils or tulips or muscari or any of those other crocus, saffron, those Dutch bulbs, this is your last chance to really get those in the ground, let them vernalize over the winter. So if you haven't done that, do that. At least get them ordered, get them in the ground. There's a blog article for free at permaculturefx.com that kind of lists out some of my top favorite ones and then how to plant them, how to determine, what you need to be doing with those. So I go into a lot more detail in that article on the blog. So second thing that I would be doing this month is winter pruning of fruit trees. Now remember, no matter what growing zone you're in, I don't care if you're in the tropics, if it's arid desert climate, or if you're in Wisconsin, please only prune your fruit trees when they're in their dormancy. Now, the reason why we do that is there's not as much sap that's flowing, water flowing through the cambium and the xylem layers. So because those stems are drier, that lack of moisture makes it a less chance of getting a fungal infection, a bacterial infection, sap dripping everywhere, or that wound not healing properly. So it's a really good time of year to get out there on those slightly warmer days and just start doing the pruning to really give those some nice shape. Now, if you want a tutorial on those and you're in the Patreon community, there is a much longer, about an hour video of how do you prune fruit trees when I was up in my parents' property up in Michigan, our family homestead, and go into a lot more depth of how do you create airflow, how do you create the right shape, types of pruners that you use, making sure that you clean them. So we go into a lot more detail in that Patreon class. So third thing that I'd be doing, so first was dormant planting of bulbs. Second is getting that fruit tree pruning done on your berry bushes, nut trees, that sort of thing. Third, first and foremost, if you're in the north, rest. Y'all, it's snowy, it's cold, it's icy, it's just not fun. So rest. And during that rest time, get a new podcast going, get a couple new books, put a new homesteading magazine on your end table that you can just kind of flip through, join a Patreon. I'm so done with the Facebook group madness, the bad advice that I have seen the last couple years in Facebook groups is literally mind-blowing to me. And honestly, some of it is dangerous. Like the worst thing that people do in Facebook groups is plant identification. Someone will post a picture of, oh, what plant is this? And there's all these stupid guesses. Not even like ignorant, like they know, but like literally stupid. And dangerous, because if you put something in your mouth and eat it that is not what you think it is, it can not only make you sick, you could go to the hospital, for that. I had a client once that, bless her heart, she decided that she took a picture of a plant and sent it to me and was like, hey, is this longevity spinach? And I was like, nope, 100% not longevity spinach. Oh, it's in the same spot that we put the longevity spinach. And I was like, I'm telling you right now, that is American pokeweed or chokeweed, and it'll make you sick. And she was like, no, I'm convinced. I put it in a Facebook group. It's longevity spinach. And I just said, hey, please do not eat that plant. Give it a couple weeks. Watch the growth habit, and you'll have a much better picture of what that plant actually is. Well, the next day, she ate it. Like, not just a little bit. She sauteed a bowl of it, went to the hospital, was there for 3 days with massive kidney problems. So I kid you not, if you don't know what it is, or if someone on Facebook, tells you what it is, that's not a proper identification method. So to me personally, I'm just done with the Facebook madness. I would much rather be in a private group or a private community that actually knows what they're talking about, to get proper identification, tips, that sort of thing. And I personally am a member of multiple Patreon subscriptions myself because I so love the learning. And honestly, I want to support that content creator. So those 3 things, again, dormant planting, pruning, and just rest, learn, grow, that sort of thing. If you're in USDA zones 9 through 11, I'm going to take a drink of my tea. Oh, that's good. I'm drinking jasmine and what was the other thing I put in here? Oh, stinging nettle. I always blend my own tea. So stinging nettle and jasmine today. So if you're in USDA zones 9 through 11, let's talk about the 3 things that you should be doing if you can only get to a couple things this month. So first, we're in the midst of annual vegetable season here in the warmer climates. So right now, because it's been really cold really early this year, we have to watch for fungal issues, bacterial issues, white fly, that sort of thing. There's a lot more attention that we need to be paying this calendar year than in the past. A lot of times in USDA zones 9 through 11, we don't get this cold until like January or 1st of February, but it got pretty cold pretty fast. So this year, a lot more attention is being paid to those other areas. So in the annual vegetable garden, the other thing that I'm really doing is bone meal, because that's got some nitrogen, it's got some phosphorus, got some potassium. It's just good, well-rounded for mid-season to give that flower boost and to help the overall health of the plants. Second thing that we're doing in USDA zones 9 through 11 is planting native pollinators. A lot of things are dormant in the food forest, so we're not doing a lot of fruit tree stuff, berry bushes, but man, get those pollinators in before the springtime. This allows them to really root in, to get settled, to get comfortable. So when the springtime does come around and it gets warm, they're going to start flowering and bringing in all those pollinators. Remember, without pollinators, you don't have fruit, you don't have vegetables. And honestly, what I do is I plan when the fruit tree is going to be flowering, what native wildflowers are also flowering at that same time. So for me, like with stone fruit, peach, pear, plum, nectarine, whatever, I do a lot of things like coreopsis, because coreopsis, or the native tick seed, is flowering at the same time as the fruit trees. So I know I'm getting those pollinators around the base of my trees, when they actually need to be there. So number 3, I would say the third thing that I would be doing right now is focusing on debris cleanup and getting things wood chipped coming into the next season, because this winter has been pretty dry. Thankfully, the wood chipped areas stay moist even when I'm not watering. So for me, I do a lot of composting. I'm getting ready to do a batch of the 18-day Berkeley method. I'm going to do a video class on that for Patreon for the month of January. A lot of worm composting right now. So getting that debris where it needs to be, getting it composted, and then ready to apply in February. I'm not really applying my compost right now, but I'm getting it ready. What I am applying is wood chips and leaf mold. I'm getting a lot of those things around the base of the fruit trees, mainly to protect the roots, to give some microclimates for bugs, for insects, for earthworms, that sort of thing. So I'm really building that soil health. over the winter months. So those are the three things that I'd be doing in USDA zones 9 through 11. So it's annual vegetable harvesting, just keeping an eye on things, doing some bone meal, planting those native pollinators around the base of fruit trees, bringing in those, especially natives. I want them to be flowering at the same time as my fruit trees. And then I'm using debris, whether it's wood chips or leaf mold or whatever, around the food forest. So that way I'm ready when the springtime comes in. So now what we're going to do is we're going to jump into a list of questions I've got here on my computer that come from our Patreon community. So our Patreon community submits questions every single month, and those are the questions that I focus on for these broadcasts. They also have access to a long growing list of video classes, tutorials, PDF documents. I think there's like 55 or 60 different classes and PDFs and that sort of thing in there literally right now. And it's ever growing. So that the Patreon community has access to all that good stuff. So let's jump into their questions this month. So let me take another sip. First one is from Janine. She says, I'd love some general encouragement and guidance. There's your encouragement. Guidance for what to do and look for post-hurricane. I fear a lot of our plants were damaged more than I initially thought, and now some of them appear to be dying. I'm guessing leave them until spring. What do you think on basically that? So first of all, I wouldn't do any pruning now for two reasons. One, it's really hard to tell sometimes if they are dead or alive. Two, wait to do a scratch test, for a couple months, because and if you don't know what a scratch test is, take your fingernail and just scratch the bark. And if it's green, you're good. If it's brown, it's bad. So then you're going to, in the springtime, then you're going to prune those things off. But the real reason I want to leave the dead on all of my plants right now is that if we do get a hard freeze, that dead material is also protecting the good part of the plant. So especially on things like bananas, I leave all of the nasty dead stuff pretty much October until March. I leave it on the plant because it's insulating the bananas, it's protecting from the frost and that sort of thing. So I would leave all fruit trees, berry bushes, whatever. I also leave my native plants, my pollinators, because even those dead seed heads are protection for bugs, protection for insects. They've laid eggs in them. So I really leave a lot of that stuff until springtime. So I would just hang tight. Don't worry about it. If in doubt, just mulch. Wood chip around the base. Keep it away from the trunk. That's the only thing that I would really be doing right now. So last comment on there says, I can't decide if we aren't bouncing back because it's winter and the growth is slowed, or if it's damaged. And again, you're not going to know that really until springtime. So the next ones here, got a couple questions from Misty. We have some citrus trees that the leaves are turning yellowish green. They're not looking real healthy. So a couple things could be going on here. If they're pale altogether, like a really pale, almost like a lime green a little bit, I would go ahead and add a nitrogen fertilizer very lightly to the trees. I would probably just do compost this time of year because I don't want them to be kicking into high, production season on that green growth. So I would probably do like compost or a really light fish emulsion spray on a day that's cloudy and overcast for a couple days, because sometimes if you get too much sunlight, it can burn the leaves on the trees. So I would say start there, wait for a week or two, and then maybe apply some Epsom salts. A lot of times the really pale leaves, especially if you have pale leaves with dark green veins, that's either going to be a magnesium deficiency or an iron deficiency. So you can spray chelated iron, or you can try the magnesium, the Epsom salts, and then give it a little bit of time. That yellowing is probably, no matter what you do, it's going to take a couple months for that to really bounce back and to get green. So I would just really focus on looking at the new growth that comes out and watch that new growth and see if the new growth is really deficient. Should we spray the citrus? Yes. So number 2, duck eggs or shells in the garden. Our ducks prefer oyster shells rather than regular shells. How do we best use their shells in the garden, etc.? Pretty much duck eggs, chicken eggs, ostrich eggs, whatever it is. If you're not rinsing them out and feeding them back to the birds, what I would do is just, rinse them out really good. I put them on like a baking tray and just dry them really, really well in the oven, and then throw those shells inside your Vitamix or your Ninja blender, waz it up into a powder, and then you can sprinkle that around the base of your fruit trees. Really good for helping prevent slug damage because the edges of those are nice and sharp. And also you're adding that calcium and magnesium back into the soil where it's going to be absorbed by your fruit trees and that sort of thing. So if the ducks aren't eating those shells as you feed them to them, don't worry about it. I would just dry them out really good and then apply them in the garden. Number 3, our Napier grass is starting to brown at the bottom. Should we chop it down to the stumps for the winter or just let it go? Generally speaking, if the Napier is not protecting something else, so a lot of times I'll do Napier on the edge of the area of a property, like the north edge, to block that harsh north wind from coming in and damaging other trees. If the Napier grass or Mexican sunflower or whatever is not protecting something, then yes, I would go ahead and trim it all the way down to the base. Napier comes back super well, and it just looks really ratty this time of year. Sugarcane does the same thing. Mexican sunflower, daisy tree, the Montanoia grandifolia. Those all look really rough this time of year, so leave them if you're using them for protection. Otherwise, cut them down to 6 inches or so from the ground. If you want a tutorial on that, there is a PDF on Chop and Drop for the Patreon community in Patreon. What is the healthiest way to handle them to make sure they regrow in the spring? Again, I would just chop them down. And remember Napier though, if you lay that on the ground, sometimes that can reroot. So in your case where you are trying, because I know Misty in their scenario, where you're trying to feed the sheep, I would probably take some of those canes and just bury them horizontally. And if they come up in the spring. If they don't, they don't. But at least, give it a shot, see what happens. So the next one here is from Emil. We have a lemon tree in the ground that died last year, but the root stock is flourishing. Can I regraft from the root stock with new cuttings? Absolutely. On citrus, the best time to do grafting, well, really grafting in general, I like to do in the spring, kind of mid-spring or early spring, or the fall, right before it starts really drying out. I want enough moisture flowing through the stems and the stalks and the branches that it helps establish and helps that graft take, but I don't want so much flowing that it's already producing flowers. If it's already producing flowers, it's probably a little bit too late. So I like to do it again, early spring when it's just, the sap is just starting to flow again, or early fall. But yeah, absolutely go ahead and do the grafting on that rootstock. And for anybody here on the YouTube channel, there is a free grafting class that a good friend of mine, Randy from Growing Earthly, taught. And so there is a full video on how to graft on that as well. Next questions are from Kristen. So I'd love to hear more about any of the tasks listed below. These are new to me. Please give a little bit more information. So the first one is on applying the soil probiotic and microbial sprays. So what I typically do for the soil probiotic is I either use ProBio or BioAg. For my livestock, I use BioLivestock. All of those are from a company called SCD Probiotics. There's a link for that under the product section at permaculturefx.com. I love what they do because they grow all of their probiotics together in one mother culture. So instead of drying the probiotics into a powder and then adding it in individually, these are grown together. And the other reason why I really like them is it's a living culture that's alive when you get it. And there's so many different strains that are in it. If one particular strain, one of the acidophilus don't thrive in your particular soil and your climate, there's a really good chance that one of the other ones will. And so I really like that they have, 17 or 21, depending on the product, different probiotics in one culture, in one product. I just think that's super, super helpful. And then all of those have a different application method. Like ProBio, I use that like in a watering can or a 5-gallon bucket, and I dump that on my compost pile. Bio Ag I use as a foliar spray, so I'll put it in one of those little spray emulsifiers that goes on the end of the hose, and I'll just spray everything down, leaves, stems, sticks, roots, everything with that. So super easy. Next one is on soil testing. Where do you do that, and how do I go about that process? Option one, no matter where you live in the US, you can go to your local extension office, and they do soil tests that range from like $11 to $45 per sample. They'll kind of give you a breakdown. What I don't like about doing that is a lot of times their recommendations are chemical recommendations that are synthetic. So if you're low in nitrogen, you need to apply this nitrogen fertilizer. The reason why they do that is the extension offices are through the local community college or the local colleges, and those are state funded and usually also funded by the fertilizer companies. And so there's a little bit of conflict of interest in that to me. I personally use soiltest.com. The soil test kits that they give, you mail in, and then the results show up on an app, and it keeps the results year to year, so you can see, okay, how am I doing on my organic matter in my soil? How have I been doing on my nitrogen levels? So you can see year to year, is what I'm doing working? And the other thing that I like about the soilkit.com is they give organic recommendations. So you can say bone meal, and they'll tell you, here's about how much bone meal you're going to need for your space. And I really appreciate that as well. Next is on pruning existing peaches, plums, pears, nectarines. I talked about that a little bit earlier. So I would say watch the Patreon video on there first on how to prune. You can just search or go to the top where it says collections in Patreon, go down to classes, and you'll see the how to prune a fruit tree or nut tree on there, and then watch that class. And then you can reach out to me after that if you have any questions in Patreon. Ordering organic supplies. Do you have any recommendations or tips on holiday sales? So the ones that she listed, first is seaweed extracts. The seaweed extract that I use sea kelp and fish emulsion all together in one product. GS Plants does a really good product that is very sustainably sourced, so I really do like theirs. Also, Neptune's Harvest is a really good one. There's one like Alaska something. I don't really love their sourcing because it comes from a lot of farms and that sort of thing. So I want something that's more wild harvested. So I use GS Plants on that one. BioAg and my probiotics around the farm, homestead, and even my personal probiotics, I always get from SCD Probiotics. And again, there's a link for that on permaculturefx.com. Neem oil. Usually cheapest always to get the concentrated 100% pure neem oil. It's in a little jug like this. Just type in organic neem oil on Amazon. And then you can get the little jug of it there for like $20. Now you can get the spray bottles, but those are like 3% neem and it's the same price. And so it's just watered down. So it's like, dude, just, blend it, blend it yourself and buy just the concentrated. Basic H I get from Shaklee, and there is a link for that on permaculturefx.com. And that one, it's important to make sure you use the original Basic H, not Basic H2. Basic H2 is primarily a household cleaner. The original Basic H has like 1,000 uses, and that is the one that you use around the garden and around the homestead. I think I'm actually going to get ready to buy a big 30-gallon drum. So if anybody that's local here wants to, go in on it, I don't need a 30-gallon, but it's just cheaper if there's a lot of people to do it that way. So we can talk about that later. And then also fish emulsion on here, and we just talked about that. So I'd love to plant a lime and a grapefruit tree. Any suggestions? Oh, fun. So on a lime tree, my personal favorite are the finger limes. They're shaped like little hot dogs. And when you open up the lime, the finger lime, it kind of comes out like caviar, like these little lime pearls. And you can like put them on fish tacos. You can put them on a salad. You can put them on the edge of a margarita glass. They're just really fun. flavor is amazing on those. They come in red, pink, green, purple. They're just really a cool looking lime. The other reason I like the finger limes is they're not susceptible to the citrus greening. It's the only citrus tree that is not susceptible to greening. So I really like that one. Grapefruit, I'm a big fan of ruby red. I really like me a good ruby red. Is it okay to put a campfire pit near a fruit tree? No, I would say keep it a minimum of 15 feet away, minimum. Because if you get a good wind that's blowing, you're going to just burn your leaves. You're going to damage them. You're going to stress them out, that sort of thing. So I would keep everything really low to the ground around the edges of the fruit tree area or the fire pit area. Don't do any fruit trees around that space, and definitely no overhead trees that are top story. Any good videos on chop and drop? Seems to be a little bit time consuming. Best tools for that. Should we dig up the roots? So videos and PDFs on chop and drop. There's a much longer tutorial. There's a PDF if you look in the collections area on Patreon that gives you the instructions there. And I believe there's a video also for the chop and drop. Best tools for that, honestly, just good old pruners or loppers are going to be my personal favorite thing. And do you dig up the roots? No. You always leave the roots when you're chopping and dropping. I never chop shorter than about 6 inches. That's the absolute lowest. On things like a pigeon pea or moringa, I pollard those, so I leave those about 3 feet high, and then I let them regrow from that height there. So those are, I believe, let me double check, all of the questions on Patreon. And then there was one other question there that says, how do I manage chickens on my property? They're getting into everything. So me personally, I let my chickens free range with boundaries. And this is our last question for the Q&A today. I let them free range with boundaries. So personally, I've used Premier One fencing. It's a solar energizer with some, mobile fencing. I've used that for almost 20 years and I love it. I have never lost a critter of a raccoon or a bear or a fox trying to get into the fence. It has worked 100% of the time. The only time I've ever lost a critter was when I either forgot to turn the fence on, which was obviously my fault, or one time I didn't, I unplugged the grounding rod and it wasn't getting a zap. And so I lost one that way. But when the fence is on and working properly, they are wonderfully foolproof, both to keep critters out, but also to keep the birds in. And so what I do personally is I have a mobile chicken tractor that I move around the yard about once a week, and then I just move that fence. For me personally, I'm not a huge, massive dude, but and I can move a coop of probably 30 birds or so and their fence in about 10 minutes. So it really is very, very fast. Doesn't take a lot of time, but it helps keep the birds in. And it helps keep the bad stuff out. The other thing that you can do is pruning their or clipping their wings. The key with chickens though is don't clip both wings because they'll still fly on stubs. But if you only clip one side of their wings, then they just kind of fly in a spiral and they don't usually learn how to like overcome that one. So just always always clip one side. They're not a fruit tree. Clip one side of their wings, not both sides, and then use the electric fencing. And that has worked for me amazing. What I love to do is if you've got a nice agroforestry row, one row of fruit trees here, one row of fruit trees here, run the chicken tractor between them. So they're not getting into the lanes of the fruit trees. They're not digging up all your plants and the roots, but they're mowing down the grass in between, they're fertilizing, they're eating the bugs and the insects. I mean, that is such a good way to run those birds through the food forest. I would do chickens even if I didn't get eggs because it's insect control. You know, they're eating those pests, they're scratching, they're tilling, the fertilizing that they're doing. I mean, I would literally have a chicken tractor even if I didn't have a food forest for that reason, because of the gift that they give to an ecosystem. The other thing that I'll always do right after they're done in an area, replant something. Sometimes it's winter wheat seed, which is what I do right now. Sometimes I'll buy a deer plot mix that's got daikon radish or turnips, winter wheat, rye, sorghum, whatever. Sometimes I'll take bird seed with whole seeds and I'll just scatter it and rake it in and just see what happens. Do wildflowers, whatever, plant something behind them. They tilled it, they tilled it up for you. They fertilize it. That soil is ready to go. Do something with it. So that's how I usually do the chickens on my property. So hopefully these questions were helpful to you. If this is your first time listening in, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget, every month we put out a free gardening calendar at permaculturefx.com for your growing zone. What do you do in the garden, around the homestead, and the farm? Goes into a lot of detail, so you can just check those boxes off, print them off, and make it a little bit easier for yourself. And then if you are in the Patreon community, don't forget, lots of good classes coming up this month. This month, the class is going to be on setting up a worm composting bin. So I'm really excited to do that. I need to make about 2 more myself. So we're going to just do that together this month. So if you have never checked out Patreon, feel free to check it out. Patreon.com/permaculturefx. Lots of classes, PDFs, tutorials, and a great community of people that actually know what they're talking about. Love to have you jump in and join us. So wherever you are in the world, in the United States, I wish you happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and all of the good things. As always, have fun, and I will see you in the garden.